Hello, hello. How you doing, Luke?
Hello.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure we're gonna have a pretty light agenda today, but I wanted to share my screen to kind of get the ball rolling. I'll also put in the link to the docs so you can add yourself as a participant and get started. And I know you said, Luke, you had something that you wanted to share as well. Do you want me to put that as an action item?
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Sure. What was the link? We put throw that in
Um,
chat. Maybe that might be
yeah,
easier.
let me find that.
Mm, Oh, there's chat. Uh, Chat. There we go. And then I want to add zero point 0.5 updates. All right. This. All right. I'll give the zero point 0.5 updates because they're pretty small. So zero point 0.5 updates, we've established a roadmap. So me and Andrea and David are gonna go start cranking away at all the items right here on this list. And that will be for zero point 0.5. The goal is to get it out by the end of this month, August. So I need to get the ball rolling on some of those issues, but we got a few done this last few weeks. So yeah, so that's kind of the gist there. And then I saw, Luke, that you had this Argo project. Can you give us kind of a summary on what this is?
Yeah, something I've talked to Andrea about, kind of something I think he was going to try a long time ago with Argo, but never got around to it. And I want something I myself was interested in and kind of playing around with this idea of like, um, how do I get Argo to be compliant with CD events. And so and also like myself coming from, I spent a lot of time in the Argo community, and it's like, oh, having worked my way to getting more understanding of CD events, I think this solves a lot of problems that I'm experiencing as far as like the interoperability along, the greater kind of application delivery domain. And it's like, and so it's like, oh, I wanted to figure out how do I get Argo to be, again, CD event compliant. And so the kind of the first attempt here is just me understanding like, oh, how does CD events work and how would I map various Argo events, CD events to
Do that.
to CD events. So it's like, oh, Argo does this, on deploy, on sync, on deleted. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, I think it would turn into these CD event type things. So I'm just like, I've created this mapping, and this is just kind of me kind of sort of brain dumping, learning, like, oh, here's how I, construct a CD event message and things like that. I know I do understand it would be much easier if I just used the SDKs or something like that instead of trying to handcraft the JSON of CD events,
Right,
but
right.
I'll get there eventually.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
if this idea fits into like depending where how this idea kind of fleshes out. It's like, do we make it a core component of Argo CD, bring in the SDKs, or do we, or in the Argo project, they have like a notifications engine, which is separate from core Argo CD. So there's different ways to play around with that.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
thinking about those
So
things, but yeah, for here where it's like, oh, in the existing out of the box Argo CD, it has a notifications controller where you can specify like a generic webhook endpoint, and you can construct whatever message you want to send it. So it's like, oh,
right, right.
that's kind of where I'm going. So, oh, let me go through that path and just kind of handcraft the CD events JSON with these kind of mappings. All right, let me take some Argo events, turn them into CD events, publish them to something. That was like a question maybe I had for you all as far as if you have like a out of the box demo environment examples for CD events, like a CD events receiver hooked up to like a Redis pub sub or Nats or something like that. Seeing if there's examples like that, or if I just need to make up my own kind of local developer or demo environment.
Yeah, yeah, I can actually get you a demo. So David has like a whole like Docker image that does what you're asking for and like has a visualization component to it as well. So you'd be able to see like the events that you're sending and receiving too. So that might be a good way to help debug and see things working appropriately. And but yeah, yeah, so I could get you that information. And then did DC, you had a question as well?
Yeah, so two things. One, when you David's thing, can you post this in the notes so that when when you do
Yeah,
find it,
yeah.
so that we can all access, because I would love to have access to that. I didn't know that David did that.
Yep,
And
yep.
considering how smart David is, I would love to see it. Um, Luke, awesome, awesome, awesome. All the things you want to do sound absolutely perfect. My question to you is, are you doing this as a thought exercise for yourself, or would you like to kind of pursue this as something where we're, you know, we're actively trying to work on what interoperability is going to be. I am working, there is an effort to normalize some of these things so that we can come up with a spec that is the interoperability spec uh, for CD events. In the work that you are trying to do, do you want to line that up with the future interoperability spec? The base problem with CD events, the general specification, especially 0.4 dot whatever we're on, is it's a little wishy-washy, right? It doesn't say, hey, do this thing this way. It's more like you might want to do it, you can do it, and so you can kind of wander around. The ideas for interoperability are very, there's some strictness to it, like some fields that always have to appear so that it is literally interoperable between systems. And so, that's my question to you. I mean, it looks like you put in a lot of effort. If we could line that up with the effort for interoperability, it would be right on track to be like just, an awesome demo overall of what we can do with it. And as we build out the tools that support interoperability, that could just be brought right in, especially if you're doing this to the project itself or donating to the project.
Yeah. Um, so my answer is yes. But I don't know what I'm saying yes to yet. It's kind of a I want to, I guess I had interpreted CD events spec as the interoperability spec, or at least that's where I thought it was kind of going. So I don't know. I guess I'd be interested in knowing what you mean by that interoperability versus what the CD spec is today, CD event spec is today.
Of course, that is literally what I was inviting you to come join that discussion, the larger discussion of how interoperability should work. Well, to give this some context, I've been in and around the CDF for about 3 years now.
Mhm.
And when I came, it was really the same thing. I was interested in the interoperability piece. And so when I started asking the people involved, like, hey, how does interoperability actually work? What is it, define it? What do you think that means? And I didn't get the answer that I thought interoperability should be. What I think of interoperability, I think of a way that I could use like Argo CD to do deployments. get a set of information from these events. But then also, if I was doing deployments with like Jenkins or Spinnaker, those deployment events would look exactly the same. Um, and you immediately kind of run into some challenges around like custom data and namespacing and how do you guarantee namespace safety. Also things like inheritance. Like if you have an event that is something that another company wants to use, or your org wants to use a little bit differently, like how do you say, well, this is kind of the same event but I just added some things and I want you to treat it like the same event. And it's those type of little mechanics that are involved in a real interoperable structure that needed to adjust. And that's part of what we've been working on over the past year as a group, answering some of those questions. And we added a bunch of, well, I guess I added some GitHub issues that kind of line up with things like, okay, we need cleaner namespacing and a better inheritance model. And then now things kind of line up and it'll work for the vendors, it'll work for the customers, it'll work for the enthusiasts, but it is actually something people can use. And then we can have things like expected fields. And like you have a really good example of things like service deploy. Like, okay, but what fields must be there every time, right? Or depending on how you were using that event. And we've come up with all of these processes to kind of create a language around this, so that it kind of lines up, but we're just at the beginning of implementing and talking about it. So yeah, it looks like you have a lot of great work here and a lot of great thoughts. I would just love to kind of expand on that or talk more about that and see where we could take it.
Yeah, and Luke, I think to kind of give like an idea is when I don't know if you ran into this when you were writing this doc, right? But I'm gonna kind of give you some examples and maybe some like some light bulbs will go off, but if they don't, that's fine. But let me know what your thoughts are on this. But the idea with interoperability before me and DC entered CDEvents is that you would have these events, right? Which are basically these atomic types, these very granular like SDLC like events, right? So if you imagine just a stream of events that goes from point A to point B, which are two different services, right? Point B, let's say, ingest some event to do something, right? Let's say we swap out with B with C, right? C would still need to understand that flow. Otherwise, it would behave differently, right? And do potentially something different altogether, especially if the CDEvents was implemented differently, right? Because you're asking the questions here when you're mapping these events, like you're like, is this a CDEvent or is this something different, right? And that same thought process can be thought differently in a different tool, right? So what we need to do is come up with stronger semantics and kind of define what that flow is from system A to system B to ensure that we have the same steps so we're able to accomplish the same outputs. So as long as the inputs and outputs are same, the service can do whatever it wants in terms of deployments, et cetera, et cetera. And then you could swap out whatever you want because those inputs and outputs are the same, if that makes any sense. But when you just have the events themselves, it allows you to describe things, but because it's so open, there's no like structure to it, people can do whatever you want and you don't really solve interoperability. You just kind of put a language around it, but you don't put any rules or constraints around it. So people kind of end up doing their own thing or defining things based because of how some of these the nomenclature isn't as specific as it needs to be, which those things are going to change. So that's what me and DC have been trying to do, is add this extra layer on top of CDEvents and make it more, I want to say stronger typed, but it's not really that. It's like stronger formatted, where you're able to make interoperability possible, if that helps.
Yeah, Ben, can you bring up the build segments and share the build segment stuff with them? I think that'll make what you were talking about a little bit.
Yeah, where is
Or
that
workflow
though?
segments. I think the workflow segments is our GitHub issues for the spec.
Okay. CDEvents spec. Ba-ba-ba. Do you remember which one it was under?
I think it's like 250 or something like that. Oh yeah, proposal for interoperability. The
This
workflow
one, okay.
segments. Yeah.
All right, yeah. So if we go down, so this kind of gives you a graph, but here's something like just build deploy. Just kind of give you an example. Oh, it's not jumping. Let me
Can
just
you make it a
search.
little bit bigger?
Yeah. Give me
Awesome.
1 sec here. Build deploy, build deploy. All right, let me increase this. Oh, let's go in the other way. All right, so what we're saying here is we have this build deploy segment. What is a segment? It's basically a group of CD events in an order. So in this case, what we're saying is these are the required fields for this build deploy, and it produces these events. So it produces pipeline run started, it produces this build segment. So that's whatever CD events that is defined in build, and then same segments for deploy, and then pipeline run finish. So that defines this in this order as well with these fields. So it's just a higher abstraction and gives some structure and context to the thing that is both producing and consuming these events, if that helps, Luke.
Is it kind of like if I come from, say, a hotel or Datadog world of like, oh, we're gonna do spans and things like
Kind
that?
of,
Yes,
but
kind of.
yeah, but it's a that so when you go into OTel, they're solving really a different problem,
Yeah,
but it's a good way to kind of think about that because in terms of tracing, right, you have like these individual spans, but they're not really helpful, right, by themselves. You need like this trace, right, like this whole full context to be able to make sense of everything, right? Because
right.
otherwise you just have these individual spans, these individual nodes. So this is kind of doing the same thing, but solving a different problem, if that makes sense.
And
Yeah,
as one final aside that I think that's important to call out is that this is for an orchestrator. So the thought here is that we're not just pushing this to a bus and saying, hey, the events are interoperable in that way. We actually want to be able to have an orchestrator receive that event and take some action. And so what we're proposing for interoperability isn't just like a bus, it is literally event orchestration where that lets you abstract all of your business logic programming that you need to do from what the tools actually do. And so if you were to have like a governance rule in a corporation like Salesforce, they could use this tool, enforce the governance rule throughout the entire company, and everyone doing CI/CD would just pick up that rule. And so that's the type of interoperability we're trying to provide, where we can, regardless of what tools people are using, we can apply a single rule from a single orchestrator, and that works regardless of the subsystems. And so if they were using Argo CD or like Spinnaker or Jenkins, the outcome of that action will be the same.
yeah, yeah. And it's kind of the my own inspiration towards this, I think, was yes, similar to this. And I think figuring out these higher level um compositions of things is I think where I was eventually going to have to figure this out.
Yeah, good, good, good. Yeah, no, and
Yeah,
when I was reading, as it was going by, I was like, you look like you were heading in that direction. That's why I brought it up.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because
and
that was like here's a little background. This was like there was a at the KubeCon Europe for the tag app delivery space. I was running a discussion there of like, oh, I want to kill the term CI/CD and just call it application delivery because it's composed of so many tools in the space. Which I'm sure you all know as well, where it's like, yeah, you do have maybe your Jenkins or your Argo and your Spinnaker, and you also have your GitHub and your Artifactory and things like that, all sorts of events. And I was at a company where we were trying to, it's like, oh, let's replace our current CI tool. And the next CI tool, it'll be the kind of Death Star architecture. It will integrate with everything imaginable. And through our evaluations, like there's no tool out there that will integrate with everything, or it's not really worthwhile for us to try to force this tool to integrate with everything. It was like it'll be a pretty good tool. It's like we might go buy like the CodeFresh product as an example, and it'll cover 80% of what my company needs. But I'm still going to have GitHub Actions. I'm still going to have some one-off CI tools, and then I'm going to have Argo, but I'm also going to have some other deploying tools, and I'm going to have Artifactory and some other tools. I was like, how do I let's stop trying to integrate everything and rather than it's like, oh, if every tool I have can just emit CD events and I'll, at some higher level, figure out how to put it together. I think like you're saying, this integration or interoperability spec. Like
Yeah, and
I could,
that's literally what you're thinking about. We've done that part, and that's the discussion I wanted you to see if you were interested in joining, so that you can bring this knowledge into that space to be sure that as we're saying, hey, this is the lowest common denominator, because that's really all we're doing is trying to find the lowest common denominator of information that we have to have tool to tool to be able to get the same thing out so that we can do programming and orchestrate against that, but also do it in a way that if it is a specialized thing that Tecton does, we can still expose that in the orchestrator. And that'll have one place where the entire SDLC workflow, it has knowledge of the entire SDLC workflow. And so like if a deployment system is running, you can actually kick off a pipeline that's completely unrelated, right? Or you can, do really cool like large deployment, scale deployment kind of things where you are, warming things up and starting them based on the progression of the deployment itself or the entire SDLC workflow. And it is that tool that is both a companion to the process and a place where you can have some business logic to be separate from the tools themselves.
yeah. One of the things I was thinking about, like coming from Argo CD, where like Argo itself is asynchronous, and I was thinking of like application delivery, the domain, or CI/CD, where it's like, oh, getting away from linear pipelines and linear pipeline thinking. Does that fit well? Like a asynchronous, some event somewhere is going to happen, whether it's your artifacts or your CIs, your deployments, in different time frames, or they'll
Yeah,
be eventually consistent kind of operations.
yeah, I think they are. I think what the industry as a whole gets caught up in is that it's actually, in a sense, all orchestrated. It's just timed and orchestrated. So what
Right.
makes something synchronous or asynchronous? I don't really think of any of the pipelines as synchronous because, they are firing off and waiting for something to happen. They once you get into that mode that you are waiting for something to finish, that kind of breaks that model of synchronicity, unless you're like holding your place while it's finishing. But if you have workers that are doing tasks, you're already asynchronous. So I think at the core, and you've actually hit on it really, really well when you said you wanted to like kill the name CI/CD. It's like there are so many names now for this work that we do, but the space is still the same, and it all is the same. We are only interested in build, test, store, and that's all we're trying to do is build, test, store plus business logic. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on this stuff, but we got to simplify it, take the opportunity to simplify it to be able to come up with the interoperability process.
Yeah. And it's kind of like full circle this PR where it's like, how do I understand what you all have put together in the spec and figuring these out? And it's like, oh, I can speak Argo. And so let me try to map things over and produce some data and then go from there. It's like, oh, what
Do
do I
you
learn? Is this helpful to
do you want
others?
us to actually review this? Because I can take some time and actually review this if that would help. I know it's not in the CD events. I mean, it's part of CD events, but it's not like in the repo. But I wouldn't mind actually taking a look and making a few comments if that would help you, Luke.
Yeah. I think there's like another table, I think further up in the document where I've just done that mapping of
The
Argo
events, yeah, the
to
triggers,
see
yeah.
events. Like that was just kind of first stabs. Like I think this is what I want to do.
Yeah. And then another thing too, because I highlighted these three, because there's already environment events and CD events. So this deployment set, we actually have a GitHub issue for just batch events in general, batching of just any sort of event. So you could batch like a whole deployment set if you wanted to. And then this one we've also thought about. We're thinking about adding queued and started. So you would have like a deployment, like queued deployment started. So you'd be able to do this one as well. But they're just not done yet. But I just wanted to make that comment, just because I know you're thinking about that, and so are we. We just don't we haven't had the time to do it yet. But it's good that you're kind of landing in the same space as us.
Yeah, and I'm not hoping for you to be all encompassing day one for me here. Just like this, mostly, yeah, it's a really fun thought exercise to start figuring this out and to understand what's going on here.
Yes.
And then another thing I'm kind of curious about, because you said So I know Argo, it, I mean, it technically has a notion of pipelines, but it's not really pipeline based. Like you can
Right.
get a graph, right? And which shows like kind of like the flow of things. But I was wondering, would you not use like the pipeline run events? Because if you remember, like our build had like a pipeline run started, right? Pipeline run finish. Is pipeline run with you probably just need to like no op that somewhere if we were to follow this like definition. I'm just giving an example. But like I guess my first question is pipeline run like something that doesn't make sense in Argo?
Um, that's a good question. Um, because it's kind of going back to this asynchronous state, and it's really like Argo is really just a reconciler, and
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
an endless reconcile loop. And so there's, I don't know, and I guess it would depend on what Argo's deploying, like for a ephemeral environment, like something I've done before, where I'll have, for every pull request for an application, I've configured Argo in such a way that it will instantiate a new Argo application and a new deployment for that pull request, and then it'll destroy it once the pull request is gone. And maybe that has a pipeline lifecycle to it versus my kind of standalone my app that is in dev and in test and in prod. There's a chicken and egg. At some point, it gets instantiated, and that app itself is forever running.
Hmm.
There's just Argo cycling through the different events of like, oh, is there a new Git change? Synchronize that change, or has someone gone in Kubernetes and changed something that's not the same on Git, so it needs to reconcile and say, no, put it back to the way it is in Git. Um, and it's like, is each event that Argo is synchronizing, like when it notices a diff, like is that a pipeline? Like I've noticed a diff, start a pipeline, synchronize, apply,
Hmm.
complete the synchronization. Is that one, or is it like app is created, start a pipeline, and app is going to live forever and is going to
Right,
keep
right.
toggling between synced, unsynced, fixing diffs, things like that.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, yeah, let me think. Let me go through your PR like in detail. And then we can sync up on Slack and we can talk about it some more because yeah, pipeline run is kind of like a very interesting one in Argo. I remember when I was looking at Argo, I'm like, I wonder how that will map. But I'm glad you're already taking a stab at it because it definitely makes, well, we have to answer that question now, right? So definitely will be nice to see how that plays out. Was there any specific questions that you had for us on this other than the table? Were you thinking of us just looking at where to go this
Yeah,
one?
just kind of the mappings, and then like you mentioned at the beginning, as far as um, I think you had that container you're talking about, a demo environment.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's
Okay.
kind of really just the other thing I was looking at if I needed to come up with my own demo, or if you had one. I think like you said, something with a visualization would be pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
It'd be really handy to
Okay.
try out.
Cool. Yeah, like I said, I'll get you that information. Well, so David's in Europe, and Europe, like I think always in August, there's like it's a huge holiday month,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Yeah,
so it's
we won't see them in July and August.
yeah,
exactly right.
exactly.
So I can't. He's usually good at responding, so I'll ping him and I'll let you know. I'm just letting you know that it might not be today, it might not be
Okay.
tomorrow. It's just whenever he
Yeah.
gets around to it. But it shouldn't be like more than a week. It's my guess. But okay, cool. I'll definitely take a
Hey,
look. Um, and
and
yeah,
Luke, and sorry to interrupt you, Ben. Just if you are interested, I'm sending out emails to the folks who are interested in the interoperability, spec that we're trying to build. If you give me your email address, I'll add you to that so you get that information as well. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, for sure. I can at least listen in, and as I learn more, I can give opinions.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just give opinions, even if you don't know, like it's
Yeah,
the,
exactly.
yeah,
It's
we
just
we need it
opinion.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you about the problems I was trying to solve and see see where it mixes in.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Yeah, okay, cool. I think this works out then, and I'll review this PR here. Uh, da, da,
You don't
da.
need to go through with like a fine comb to the PR.
Oh,
I'm just kind of sort of brain dumping things, um, and jumping around. I'm not kind of iterating through experimenting, learning. So I was like, oh, let me plug this all in to a demo and see what comes out the other side, and be like, oh, I'm sure I'll get a lot more light bulbs at that moment.
right, right. So, out of curiosity, how, because this, have you talked to the Argo community at all? Like, how have you mentioned like starting this proposal? Are they aware? Have you
Yeah.
gotten any feedback or etc.?
If you actually look at my proposal at the very top, there's a link in the
This
file
one?
change. Sorry.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, I should update that summary. Yeah, there's an old pull request there. Yeah, that you're clicking on, that you're
Okay.
hovering over. Um, so this was like in Argo. They're like, oh, we should do this a long time ago, and um, I think Andrea is like, yeah, I'll run with this, and it didn't um, happen, and that's totally fine. And so I've talked to Michael Crenshaw here. He's one of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
core contributors. I know him pretty well. Um, and so yeah, they would love to see this kind of take off again.
Okay.
See the discussion. So they're interested in that's kind of part of me opening this proposal pull request to Argo saying an idea. Let's just kind of getting those discussions.
Okay.
And
I
that's
have a question for you that
yeah.
is not really related to this, but more of the UX. I'm just kind of curious to see how you envision this being present in Argo. And what I mean by that is this something that users would see and have access to and be able to like modify or do stuff with? Or do you envision that this would just go to event brokers and it'd be completely transparent to end users?
Um, that's a good question. Where like as I was looking at how I might craft these messages in Argo today, I was like, oh, it's handy that it's very transparent in the user space when if I'm handcrafting the notification template um, in Argo, people will see that and go, oh, as I'm digging in, like, oh, there's like how a user defines what an environment is, as an example,
Mhm.
and how they might conceptualize that. In Argo, I think different users would have different ideas, whether it's a namespace, a Kubernetes cluster, something else, and like which of those properties would a user put into the CD spec property for an environment?
Yeah,
Think
and I
thinking a
think that
lot.
this, guys, is one of those questions where it's like if it's a situation where the group that has that Argo CD, they own everything, then having it be transparent to the user is fine. But anytime that you have something that's multi-tenant or like people have different projects to report to, you've got to give the user that flexibility to make some decisions about what is going in and where is it going. Just as not even as a courtesy, but as to make it functional. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a bunch of config files and, trying to navigate this for like this person behind the scenes or this team behind the scenes. The more that you make transparent upfront to the user, to this, point about understanding how the user wants to do environment, really does answer that question. Like they should have exposure to it because they are making decisions about their environments and things that they are doing.
Right.
But yeah, no, then Luke, you're calling it out perfectly, right? There's a lot of choices that they have to make for themselves. And so that should be one of the choices that they can make for themselves. Anyway, that's just my thought. I always want to empower the people that use a tool to like use it correctly and make their own decisions. But I also understand that sometimes there are groups with, leadership groups that are like, hey, I want to be able to do this thing unilaterally. But that's part of the problem that we're trying to solve with Conduit, right? It's like, okay, here are your unilateral things plus the group driven things can both be consumed and happen at the same time. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, I'm in definitely the same philosophy camp. And that's why I was just kind of wondering like how Luke envisioned this working in Argo. Like would they even know about CD events, or would it be actually transparent where they could like configure it within like their GitHub repo or however you configure things inside of Argo, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so that's really some interesting information. I'm gonna continue because like what it almost sounds like. So I'm gonna let me know if this is what you're all saying. It almost sounds like that CD events could become a first class like citizen or feature like that's expressed to the end user of these like CI/CD tools. Is that correct? Like where everyone would have access to like configuring and modifying whatever pipelines that they have, whether that be CI or CD, and make the
Well, how else would you
events.
do it?
Well, that's what I was wondering, like if that's what we were saying,
Yeah, that's what
because
we're saying because it's like if a person doesn't want to do CD events, then why force them to do it? That's the first thing that I always think of. Like if they this is oh yeah, I know that thing's there. I'm never going to use that. Blah 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 blah. Or if there is more than one team using it, you now have to say, okay, even if this is something they do internally, are they both sending their CD events to the same source? How do you provide a way for them to send to two different sources? That would be a config file if it's hidden from them. One group would have to say, I'm going here for my CD events. Another one would have to say, I'm going there for my CD events. As soon as there are decisions to be made about the what and where, it's always easier to give it to the user and say, hey, this is something that we support. Where would you like it to go? I mean, we
yeah,
do it with
yeah,
notifications, right? You don't just start sending out notifications. You've got to say, hey, where's this notification going? And, where would you like it to go? Yeah. And so I don't think
and
of it as
what
any
is the
different.
message, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But okay, cool. Because yeah, I was thinking about that problem a lot just recently, just with like different tools and how CD events should be exposed to them. Um, so I was just kind of curious, like if what Luke's thoughts were as well. Being from the Argo CD land, because
Hmm.
Argo is very different. Because like you were saying, Luke, it's very async and everything just kind of happens like asynchronously, almost like automatically. So I'm just kind of wondering like if CD events would even be visible to the end user. And it sounds like you're in favor of it being visible.
Yeah, there's going to be some middle ground on that. I think there's um, like in Argo itself, its notification engine, it has integrations to like Slack and PagerDuty and other tools. And so the full Slack API isn't to expose to the users, though you can, if you wanted to, you can customize and you know custom write your own JSON if you wanted to.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh, I'm guessing like for CD events it'd be something like that. It's like, oh, let's embed the SDK and give like an easy way to configure your CD event and like some out of the box opinionated messaging or templates or something like that that already exists. And like from my experience operating Argo CD in a platform engineering multi-tenant giant um, enterprise where we gave users Argo, but we gave them like, it's a read-only Argo. It's a very opinionated. We've come up with your application templates. We've come up with standard notifications to Slack and to logging and things like that. It's like this, these are the rules that apply to everyone, kind of our golden path sort of things. But it was also transparent. Like everything open configs where everyone could say, yeah, these are the rules we've set for everyone. But you can go make a pull request to those rules if you think we need to adjust somehow.
Ah, it's like an
Yes.
override, right? So that's
Uh,
actually
it's just
it's
kind of
not.
like a inner sourcing or platform engineering.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Where,
no. That part I'm super familiar with, but I mean
yeah,
the concept that I'm hearing is like there might be a case where you want to say, okay, for this, whatever the tool is, whether it's Argo CD, Jenkins, whatever, you can only do CD events in this way. Um, and so that's what I'm saying, like having some sort of like global override for everything where you can just with a checkbox say, nope, we only get to do it this way and it works that way and everybody has to do it the same way. I think that's something that some customers would be interested in if you can, by config, have a complete CD event override
Yeah.
where the tool only did the one thing. We would still need like the libraries, to do the validation and things. But I could see something like that satisfying the kind of need where in a platform situation where you wanted to be super strict. The other side of that too, and just in the opposite way, because there's things like custom data, I could see teams wanting to have team specific custom data as well and include that for whatever reason, whatever metadata that they needed it for, to be able to add that to an event for another system to consume as well. And so that's where I'm talking about like they should be able to access it and have some freedom and make some decisions. But if once you say it only works this way, then you're basically saying to that team, you don't get to use CD events. You are impacted by it, not a user of it.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm trying to understand is like how which philosophy are you going with, right? And I think I lean more towards your philosophy, DDC, where I believe that users should be able to control like the CD event itself. But I know everyone doesn't share that same philosophy. That's why I was just kind of curious. And yeah, but I'll talk to you more, Luke, on this because I think it's a very interesting conversation. And it definitely sounds like you do believe that Argo would work one way. But once you start thinking about like custom data, like the DC said, like if someone wants to provide their own custom data, how does that get injected into Argo CD, right? So that's something that definitely needs to be called out, at least in the proposal as well, which I don't think you have. Let me see.
No, I don't think or I mean, I think I talked a little bit about custom data as like, yeah, there's of all the things about an Argo app,
Yeah, yeah.
not everything maps, say like one to one to like their Argo specific details. It's like, oh, just dump it into custom data and
Gotcha,
figure.
gotcha. So this is less about the user, more about the tool being the user of custom data,
Yeah, it's
rather
like
than the
Argo
team.
produces
Yeah,
all this information about an application, but not all those, individual fields might map to a CD event
yeah,
spec.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like I said, I'll definitely ping you on this because like I said, I've been like literally these last like 3 weeks, I've been thinking about the UX standpoint of like how to make CD events visible in like these type of tools, and so I'm definitely interested in see how and what your philosophies are as well, and see if we
Yeah,
can
I
land on
certainly,
something
yeah,
consistent.
part of my vision is I almost don't think a user would have any idea that CD events exist in Argo. Rather, I'd want them to see it at the other side. If I'm in an enterprise where it's like, oh, we can deploy a dozen instances of Argo and they're all producing CD event specs to our message bus, and I can look at my one visualization tool and I can see all the instant or I can see all my applications being tracked in this kind of standard way, interoperable way, and go, oh no, I see it as an auditor or something like that. Or if I wanted to be able to do my DORA metrics across my enterprise, I don't have to track down which Argo and which app is where. It's like, oh, it's just all standard CD event metrics, and I just go measure that and whatever end tool is going to consume all these events.
Right, right. Okay, cool. Like I said, I like it. I like that you're thinking about this as well because, like I said, been thinking about this for the last like 3 weeks. But I'll definitely take a look at your PR. Like I said, I like how verbose it is. I like all the questions. I had one question in here that I thought was really interesting, but I already lost it. But yeah, yeah. Like I said, I'll go through the PR and see if there's any other questions that I might have. I'll just ping you on Slack or on GitHub itself, and then we can kind of go from there. So
Yeah.
with that said, we have 10 minutes left. Does anyone have anything else? I was just going to give the zero point 0.5 updates. And that was it. And if we have more, then we can go ahead and add them. But if not, then we can get 10 minutes back. All right. Well, thanks everyone, and thank you, Luke, for joining. Happy to have you involved, and appreciate you trying to get this into Argo, because I think that'll be a very good use of CD events, and then really makes a lot of sense. And like I said, we'll help you answer any questions that you have and try to make that as easy for you as possible.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
chatting with you all.
Yep. Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.